Welcome to NovoEDTalks, where we reveal real-world strategies and expert insights from learning and development professionals. In every episode, we chat with practitioners, course designers, learning strategists, and business leads. We hear about their experiences in the learning industry and predictions for the profession and the trends that they're seeing. But before we get started, a little bit about NovoEd. Founded at Stanford's Social Algorithms Lab in 2012, NovoEd is a people-centric, capability-building platform that combines social and collaborative learning to drive performance readiness at scale. Through cohort-based experiences centered around human interaction, NovoEd taps into collective wisdom, placing each learner at the center of perspective, application, and expertise. Large enterprises such as 3M, GE, Marriott International, and Nestle partner with NovoEd to accelerate their critical initiatives, reconnect teams, and achieve rapid alignment through learning that is felt, experienced, and swiftly transformed into impact. Now, let's meet our guest for today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NovoEDTalks podcast, a space for training trailblazers to get real. My name is Melissa Fisk. I'm the producer of the NovoEDTalks podcast, and today I am joined by Laura Ashley Timms. Laura Ashley Timms is a best-selling author, renowned coaching thought leader, and COO at Notion, which is the L&D Supplier of the Year. Co-creator of the award-winning Star Manager program, she helps organizations leverage operational coaching to boost performance, productivity, and engagement. With over 30 years of international business experience, Laura is celebrated for her results-driven approach and has been featured in Forbes, HBR, BBC, and more. Laura, you are an absolute rock star. Welcome to the NovoEDTalks podcast.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well, why don't you start by just kind of introducing yourself a bit more, talking about your role, your company, and what your day-to-day looks like.
Fantastic. Well, I'm the COO of Notion, which is a performance consultancy. And really, the purpose, what gets us up every day, is to unleash the potential of everyone. And I know that sounds really high and mighty, but a lot of the work we're doing really leans into that. And it's kind of what we do every day as an organization kind of has that as the outcome at the end of it. So, you mentioned operational coaching and the kind of the Star Manager program and this concept that we've designed to really help leaders and managers bring coaching into the flow of everyday work. And the book, The Answer to the Question, is making this more accessible as well to a broader audience. But what we're really looking to do is to transform the capability of managers and leaders anywhere. So our mission really is to look at how can we help all leaders and managers to be upskilled, to really think about what's their purpose and function in today's world as a leader and manager. And in doing that and bring kind of operational coaching into their day-to-day habitual way that they just are, into who they are as leaders, we believe if we can get enough people to do that, we'll create epic workplace cultures. And EPIC stands for engaging, productive, inclusive, and collaborative. And wouldn't we all like to work somewhere like that, where every day you're working with people that are engaging and productive, and your managers listening to you and asking you great questions? So we believe if we can create a cloud effect of having more managers who enjoy that side of their role, then we can unleash the potential of everyone. And that's what we do every day.
That's amazing and so powerful, and what a mission to be on. I'm sure that's very fulfilling for you and your team.
Yes.
Why don't you talk a little bit about, kind of who some of the learners you are that you oversee, or the people that you're working with, and what challenges they face?
Well, our core clients include leaders and managers, everyone from aspiring managers up to the C-suite, and actually from a huge range of organizations. So we work with everyone from fast growth sort of entrepreneurial businesses right through to the Fortune 500 and the sort of top FTSE countries. And we've worked in about 40 countries around the world as well. So really diverse, all sectors. So this is really very much a global skill that applies to all of us. But we're also coming to this very much from the side of the managers and leaders themselves. This isn't about just what's good for the organization. It's really recognizing that really the challenges that all of us are facing right now in our everydays are huge. We are probably more overwhelmed than we've ever been. We're more stressed as leaders and managers than we've ever been. We're probably overworked. We know in a lot of organization retention issues are really huge because, we just haven't got capacity and time to do all of that really great stuff of kind of supporting and developing our team in the way we know we probably would like to. We've got the highest disengagement across a workforce than we've ever had in history. The average of disengagement is now something like 90%, if you look at all the Gallup statistics, which means that only 10% of our workforce is actively engaged. There's been massive changes in values since the post-pandemic. Our belief of what the work-life balance should be has altered dramatically in the last 5 years. We've had to lean into juggling hybrid working. And also, actually, as leaders and managers now, we're very much expected to really understand well-being and the well-being of our teams in a way that we were not 5 to 10 years ago. That didn't really
Yeah.
sit under us. Many of us run away from having challenging conversations because they're not that comfortable to do. And then on top of all of this, we're managing for the first time ever 5 generations in the workforce. So we've got to understand how to motivate and develop someone who's nearer my age and someone who my children's age who are just joining the workforce now. And we've all got very different expectations of what work is for us and what it's there to do. And one of the only things we probably have in common is that we would like our managers to coach us and not boss us, kind
Right.
of from that point of view. And then layer on top of all of this that about, I think it's 82% of us are accidental managers in that we got into this role as a manager or leader because we were good at doing something else. We were subject matter experts. We were really good at what we did. And someone taps on the shoulder and said, your next job is this promotion. And by the way, there's some people management that comes with that.
Yeah.
But we didn't necessarily set out to be people leaders and people managers. So kind of layer that all on top. So it's a pretty challenging time to be
Yeah.
having all of that. And just even when I kind of go through that list of things I've just gone through, it's quite stressful. I find it
Yeah.
actually emotionally stressful just thinking about that. And that's what all our leaders and managers and all organizations are pretty much facing every day. They're juggling all of those things in their minds on top of their day job, really, of also doing some of the work they're expected to do and all the KPIs and performance indicators they're expected to deliver. So
It's
it's really, really
exhausting.
challenging. It's crazy, right? And that's the environment we're in. So tell me, what are they facing? That's what they're facing right now.
Yeah, it's incredible. So how do you suggest like folks approach some of these challenges and how are you solving for them?
Well, I think the first thing to really think about is it's not going to get any easier. So pace of change is going to accelerate. It's not going to like, oh, it'll be better next year, it'll be better next month. It won't even be better next week because, you mentioned at the beginning AI and how AI is changing everything for us. AI is changing weekly. Its capability, what it's going to do, our involvement and how we're going to embrace it is also changing weekly. That's just a small example on top of everything else I just mentioned about how things are evolving and changing. So the first thing I think we've got to understand in terms of our challenges right now is that we need to embrace this. We need to understand and be resilient and able to lean into this pace of change and get relaxed about it and really think about really what we believe our role now is. If AI is really going to come along and take a lot of the knowledge roles effectively, it can do that better, faster, quicker, and more accurately than we can. What should we be evolving and developing in terms of our core skills so that we're adding value and working at a higher level? It's almost thinking in terms of challenges is how can I help AI make my current role redundant and release more time to do a higher value role?
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And as these kind of skill sets are shifting so rapidly that we need to, stay on top of everything, handle all of those challenges that you were pointing out, what strategies do you suggest that people deploy to kind of make sure that their workforce remains adaptable and prepared?
Well, I think in many ways, I mean, obviously I'm super biased, right? One of the things that I think is really, really important is I think AI and tech is going to take a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the day-to-day work that was bogging us down, a lot of the administrative type tasks. What we need to focus on in terms of to upskill all of ourselves, all of us, is really thinking about that human side of change and the human skills we need, because people, we're not machines, and we're not wanting to be living in a world of just machines. We really enjoy human connection. We met, your organisation, I met your organisation at an event, face to face, a human event with humans talking to each other. That side of life isn't going to go away. And actually developing that expertise around communication, around really coaching, how can we really engage and develop our people and our teams so that we really love that side of the role. So very much what we are focused on and what we think is a really critical skill, and why we created operational coaching, is to help leaders and managers be really relaxed about, in that really busy life that we lead, how can we save time by having an operational coaching style of management, and not perceive coaching as this formal one-to-one activity that takes our time. No one's got time in their lives to sit down and have those one-to-one coaching conversations. But what if we just learnt the craft of embedding powerful questions into our day-to-day conversations? What would that do for us? And that's a skill that we believe is critical for successful leaders and managers in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so powerful and maybe a simple concept, but could bring about some incredible change and have those hard conversations, which are there's only growth that comes from those, right? In one way or another.
Absolutely.
How do you suggest people kind of look at their maybe leadership teams and, assess and address, whether or not there's skills gaps there?
Well, it's really interesting. I'm kind of a little bit obsessed with data capture and ROI and how you capture data. So I think any of your listeners who are designing and building programs or looking at programs they've already got, you've always got to start at the beginning of the journey. If you want to measure anything, if you want to capture data, you have to build that into the process. So everyone says like things like you can't measure coaching, it's all this sort of soft and fluffy stuff, or it's confidential, or there's things you can't do. Honestly, if I'm allowed to use the word, that's bullshit. You can measure coaching. I can evidence for probably any program we've run what the ROI is, and very hard data measures. But you can only do that if you start with that as an intention, and you actually capture kind of starting points in the journey, and throughout the journey have data capture. So the one thing I think, and actually AI should make this easier, not harder, and tech should make this easier and not harder, is we need to think about data and measures as part of our core design elements when we're looking at programs. And then if we're doing that as standard, we then have that data to understand where the skill gaps are and where the opportunities are, and what the requirements are. So as an example, we've got data embedded into our core program in lots of different ways, but right at the beginning, we look at how leaders and managers spend their time between the four domains of leadership. So how much time do they spend coaching or leading or managing or doing tasks. So that's an example. We also get them to measure themselves against 9 core management competencies, and then set goals about how to improve that. And we do that at the middle of the program as well, and at the end. So they're taking ownership for how they're evolving their own thinking and development, but also understanding and becoming more aware of the gaps in their own development and where the opportunities for stretch are. So there are a few examples. There's other measures that we embed in, but there's a couple of different ways that we do it, which increases people's own emotional intelligence, their own awareness, but also their own skills gaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have like, really specific core KPIs or data points that you could talk a little bit more about in those programs?
Yeah, so we have about 7 different core measures that are automatically embedded in what we do. So I mentioned the 4 domains. So we typically capture a percentage of time spent. So we know kind of what the typical time is across all organizations at the start of any journey. So we're kind of with no intervention. And actually, we can probably share a case study, a little bit of a case study later, where we can put that into very specifics. But the idea is we understand how people are spending their time. So that's a measure. So percentage of time spent leading, managing, doing, and leading, managing, doing, and coaching. So that's a data. The 9 competencies that we measure gets a score per competency and then an aggregated score. And then we measure the percentage increase on management capability during the lifetime of a program. So how much can you increase your overall management capability and your management competence? We also get people to capture actual examples of where they're applying their learning in their day job. So within the program, we embed that what's really, really important for behavioral change programs is actually workplace activities. So we are embedding workplace missions after every piece of learning, but also reflective thinking. So we have reflective logs. So we have this sort of learn, do, review concept that goes right through everything we do. So within that, one of the things I invite you to do is capture things that they have done that have made a difference and what that difference is, and then categorize that. So it could be things around process improvements, engagement improvements, retention, revenue growth, cost savings, or different things like that. And then we can also collate at organizational or team level or any level, individual level even, across the lifetime of a program they've been on, what actual number of successes have they logged, but also what categories, and are there any ROI, commercial ROIs that have come out of those specific examples that they've applied as a result of their learning. So as a result of that, we can normally collate at organizational level some really big ROI numbers, as well as really specifics about where they're drawn from and types of examples of how they're applied, as well as these more holistic percentage of increase in management capability or how they're spending their time now.
That's brilliant and amazing. And I love how kind of broad that is, it so that you can really get into the specifics. You're really looking at everything so you can point to like areas that have been very successful. Speaking of, do you have any, you did mention you have some case studies, that you could share. Would you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can tell a little bit. I think one that's really interesting, and I don't think there's many people who would be stupid enough to do this, let alone do it. But when we were doing this work, and we were obviously measuring what we were doing in terms of operational coaching and the impact it was having, the UK government became aware of it, and they were looking at how they could drive UK productivity more holistically. And we were invited to get involved in a randomized control study, which was evaluated by the London School of Economics, which I don't know if you're listening aware of it. It's one of kind of the most prestigious universities in the UK and globally, very well respected. And at the time, we thought, yeah, of course we'll get involved. We're really happy to support the government and look at how we believe operational coaching can drive productivity at scale. So yes, let's have a look at it. So the London School of Economics did a study whereby they had 62 organisations from all different sort of sectors, 14 sectors, all different sizes, and we had managers from aspiring managers to C-suite, all age groups, all genders, a complete mixed group, go through the programme with a control group and with organisations that were on the programme. And then this was measured in detail. And then 6 months later, they looked at the study to look at the metrics of what was the difference between organisations that had people go through a Star Manager programme and understand operational coaching and apply operational coaching, and those that didn't. And what they found was within just a period of 6 months, they found that first of all, everyone at the start was identical. So all groups were pretty much spending their time in the same way. But when we looked at that 4 domains of leadership data, at the end of the study, people that had been through the program were spending 70% more of their time coaching and more time leading and significantly less time doing. So effectively what was happening is that once you learn how to empower and develop your team, you stop feeling the need to tell people what to do, or more likely step in and do the doing of your teams. They come with you a problem, you go, oh God, I can do it faster than help you do it yourself. So I'll just do it. And I'm taking that problem on myself, and I'm getting bogged down and bogged down and bogged down doing more and more work and more tasks for others. And I'm not doing the higher value work I should really be doing. So organizations are effectively paying twice for that work to be done, the doing. So what we found was, and what LSE found, is that you can release that, get 20% of your time back, like a day a week for a full-time worker, and instead spend 70% of your time coaching. Big shift. The other thing they found that delivered, which we didn't know because they put some extra measures around the academic study, was there was a 6 times increase in retention. So there's a massive shift in retention. But interestingly, and these organizations also grew disproportionately, but not with more managers, they just had more staff. So managers were able to take on more and support more people as well. So they were able to take on more people, but not increase their manager headcount. So that was really interesting. They also found all 9 management capabilities and competencies increased in this 6-month period. And on average, we found about a 20% increase just in the first 6 months of overall capability. And the learner ROI that was captured through those successes I mentioned averaged 74 times ROI per learner. So for every dollar invested, $74 came out the other end by changing this habitual response of moving from telling someone what to do to asking powerful questions and empowering someone to really develop themselves. So that was a massive, massive data. And the government, when they saw that data, said, this can't be true. It's too good to be true. It's not true. So they threw it back at LSE and said, can you recut the data, take big organizations out, take small ones out, take experienced leaders out. And they recut the data for 3 months. And 3 months later, LSE said, no, it's real, it's true, this is the data. And so the government actually said it can't be true. And they cut the data again. And then 3 months later, they said it's completely robust, it's true. So it's kind of, and I think what was really weird about that whole case study and that whole story is we hadn't really realized, it's our naivety about doing something like that they were going to publish it whether it was good or bad results. If the
Wow.
results had been bad, it could have completely crashed our company.
Wow.
It would
Well,
have been
that's
published and be damned as kind of the culture in academia, which we didn't know about. So thank God it came out well.
took the pressure off, I guess.
Yeah,
But
we only realised halfway through, and by then we were committed. And
yeah,
we didn't even think about it as a risk assessment, partly because we'd never had a bad experience with a client, so we didn't have that. But that was just that was naivety from a project of this scale. That was probably one of my weaker moments on risk management.
wow, but no, still, what an incredible case study. And I love, I think what you pointed out too in at the beginning of that, which is so, important. And I think, every organization should really think about that is leaders who do exactly what you pointed out, where it's like they're like, oh, I can just do that quicker. And so they do it. And like that such a simple thing, but how often that probably happens in leadership roles and that people are doing that. And then to point to those metrics that you discussed, like because of things like that, is like, wow, like if we can shift that mindset to doing this, like look at the value of doing that. Because I think every leader is probably guilty for doing that at one point, in some way or another.
And they're coming from a good place. They want to help the
Yes,
person that's
of
come up with the
course.
problem. They're not doing it in any way but in
Of
a supportive
course.
way. But in
Of
doing
course.
it, you're robbing the other person of a learning opportunity and you're just taking on more stress and work yourself. So it's a lose-lose.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that in such detail. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about technology. What role does technology play in your programs, and how do you leverage, different tools and platforms to kind of enhance learning, mentoring, coaching experiences?
Actually, we were fairly early adopters actually, in that we were doing sort of Zoom and Skype coaching, years before anyone ever had really heard of it, and well before the pandemic. And we'd actually been challenged to take our main behavioural change program and turn it into a scalable virtual program well ahead of kind of COVID hitting. So a couple of years before the pandemic, we were already delivering sort of globally through virtual, using technology through virtual ways. But I think one of the things we thought was really important when we went about this journey was really keeping the diversity and the engagement was really critical in any kind of virtual online learning. So there's about 18 different types of activities and sort of use of technology just within a single module, so that every minute or two the learner is having a different experience and using different cognitive elements, so that it's not a passive experience. My Our CEO Dominic is an ergonomist by trade, which is we click a bell every time he talks about this at home, actually, because he's also my life partner, my husband of 25 years. But the kids used to always hit a bell because he used to always talk about it. But he's just coming from everything, and from learning in particular about the learner experience. How are they experiencing something? And is something that's about to happen on the screen or anywhere going to take them out of that learning? And if it is, then we shouldn't be doing that. So we worked with some very experienced learning designers, and they were like saying things, making suggestions. But Dominic would brilliantly be able to look at it and go, but if they do that, they will stop thinking about this. And what we need them to do in this 1 or 2 minute segment is to make this cognitive aha, which then allows them to move on and want to do the next part of the program. So really understanding, if you want to generate genuine measurable behavioral change from your programs, you've really got to think at that level of detail as what is the learner doing and experiencing each moment they're going through this program. So we use technology to keep the variety, lots of different things, whether it's drama videos or interactive elements, obviously things like workplace missions, and then reflective learning. And in the actual point of the learning, having that reflection is absolutely critical for behavioural change. No platform at the time could allow us to do that. So we designed lots of bespoke elements to work within our platform to allow learners to have these aha moments as they were working through it all. And the other thing I always remember when we were working with the the instructional design organization that helped us at the time move from workshop to some real virtual scalable work of this nature, is they told us we couldn't put humor in because humor was different all over the world. And we just thought, well, if we're not going to insult anyone, and if some people laugh and others don't, does it matter? If you haven't got a sense of humor, or you don't find our sense of humor funny, but you're not unhappy about it, we're not insulted you, and you're oh, that's a bit boring. That's okay if the other half are laughing, right? So
Right.
in terms of getting this concept of having fun, you've got to have fun
Yeah.
doing this. I
Yeah.
held this guy's hand and I made him skip around our office. And I said, this is how I want people to feel when they're in the platform, when they're in the program. They have to have this joy in their heart and be skipping inside. And that was kind of thing he thought was mad. He works with all the top companies in the world as well. And he always still talks about that, like this mad moment. But I think it's really important, even if you're using technology, to still think about, are we having fun? Is this great? You know, are people smiling? Are they enjoying it? And then the third thing I would say that, you know, you can't be just technology. So if we're looking for really high engagement, we do incorporate live support and live elements within it. So we do a live kickoff for a little bit to get that real engagement and people understand why they're doing the program. The other thing we do actually is we ship, once they're registered, they get this box of goodies that comes out in their post, which has got environmental triggers. So it's got things like the book in it, it's got a pack of powerful playing cards, it's got stickers, it's got coasters, it's got things that they will leave around their home or their office to remind them to stop telling people what to do and to remember to ask a powerful question. But this idea of having environmental triggers, I think, is really important rather than just being on your phone or your iPad or your computer. So it's about mixing it up, leverage technology, absolutely, but also use other stuff to keep it real.
Yeah, I love that. You know, we're all about keeping it real here. And I think that's so, and I love like the humor part of it because that's how like we like to laugh, right? Most people like to laugh. And
I
if
do,
you
yeah.
don't like, ooh, you know, but I'm sure there may be people who don't enjoy humor. I don't know. But you know, like make it light. And I think like what you've gotten at is like the core of your program is kind of like humorous, like stop telling people what to do, you know? So the fact that you're kind of utilizing that and being authentic with it and real with it and you know bringing that into light is really powerful, so I love that. Shifting gears a little bit and thinking about just kind of the industry in general, I have a two-part question. What the first part is retroactively, like looking back over the past 5 years, you know, what are some of the biggest, you know, shifts that you've seen like come out of like the rapid development that we've seen in the past 5 years?
I think one of the biggest things is there's been a bit of I will say this, almost like a rush to the bottom, not a bottom in terms of being in a negative way, but a competition to get a lot of volume of content out and create almost like the Netflix of learning. So I think a lot of organizations are buying systems where there's a plethora of learning that they can access at a really good price. And the problem with that is that it's a bit like people can help themselves, self-serve, so find something and then they'll watch a 10-minute video. But all of the evidence, again, is cognitively watching a 10-minute video about something is interesting and entertaining, but it won't change behavior. So you've got to be careful, I suppose, with the accessibility now of some of this learning and some of the systems that are in place and the packages available to acquire this knowledge. Is will it actually change behavior, or is it, you know, if I want to change a tire, watching a YouTube video teaching me exactly how to change a tire for my model of car is really useful, but probably next time I need to change a tire I'd need to get that video out again and watch it again and change it again. I'm not going to retain that. I'm just
Right.
following instructions. So I think there's an element of it's helpful to have some of that, but that can't replace any learning that's related to behavioral change. And entertaining isn't the same as learning. And sometimes you have to learn iteratively. I think there's this feel that just in time you can go and get information, but I think there's been a real shift away from actually before you acquire this skill you need to have this baseline skill first, and then you build upon it and you build upon that. And this idea of taking baby steps to go from here to here and making it accessible rather than just sharing the knowledge at the top end of the scale, and there's a big gap about all of the stuff in between, is some of the things I think are at risk. So I think it's, really thinking about how we leverage some of the positive things, accessibility, but in a way that's quality, not quantity.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. What you talked about is like yes, there's all kinds of mediums we can deliver content in, and but like and there's all kinds of ways that people enjoy those mediums, but what are they enjoying it for? And like, don't just because, oh, everyone's on this medium, you can't necessarily put your content there and they're gonna consume it and like retain it the same way because they're used to doing something else on that medium, right? And you can't like force the behavior to change there. I love that. So the second part of my question, obviously, is, looking to the next 5 years, what do you think, people are going to be doing, or how do you think people should be, leveraging tools, leveraging technology? What should they be keeping in mind as technology continues to advance really rapidly over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We sort of touched on this earlier. I think the reality is the advance of AI and the speed that it's going to be taking over a lot of our core administrative type jobs is going to devalue knowledge very quickly. Historically, we've been promoted or we've been respected because we've got a degree or we've got some knowledge or I've got 10 years experience doing X, Y, or Z. A lot of that knowledge is now going to be available to everybody in a flick of a prompt. Just craft a good prompt and you're going to be able to access that knowledge pretty quickly, which is going to devalue that currency. So the currency that needs to replace that, on the basis you won't be able to trade on that much longer, is going to be your human skills, your communication skills, how you engage with people, how you make people feel. And so I think there hasn't been a lot of focus in recent years on what historically maybe was called soft skills, but let's recall them human skills. I think
Mm,
those human skills are going to become critical to success. And I think some of the tech skills we've lent on historically are going to be replaced with AI, is my prediction. And I think there needs to be a bit of a refocus on what we're investing our money in as organizations to support our people.
absolutely. I think that's right on cue. Laura, to close on a positive note, what's the most important lesson that you've learned as a leader that you'd pass on to someone just starting out on their journey?
Oh, am I allowed to do more than one?
Powerful one, maybe.
Oh, I'm really struggling. I had different things here that I wanted to share for different reasons. I'm going to share them, and if you want to edit it down to
Yes.
one, so you can.
Yes. No, share them
I'm
all.
gonna, so I will let you at the back end. But there's differences because it depends on who your audience listen to, which one of these might really land with them the most. One of my earliest lessons in life, which I is probably one that I share a lot with certainly younger people in organizations when I'm sort of mentoring, coaching them, is don't assume your leaders and managers are psychic. I
Mm,
think there's a real expectation when you're working in an organization that someone's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, "Oh, I've spotted you doing this. That's great." I'm going to say, "Okay, future feedback is great. We should definitely be doing that, guys." But actually, if I have a passion and a goal, don't assume that my boss knows that, and don't
yeah.
assume that they are looking out to find a way of helping me achieve that, because they are not psychic. They are not superhuman. They're probably really nice people, and they really do want you to do well in life, but they are not magic. So the first thing to say is, if you do have a goal, let people know about it. So don't assume anyone's psychic, tell people. And I remember really early on in my career, I was working in London for a retailer and I was desperate to go and work for Brooks Brothers in New York. I worked for Marks and Spencer's, who bought at the time Brooks Brothers. And I know Brooks Brothers is not a brand that's really around that much anymore, but it was an iconic brand when earlier in my career. And but I also just wanted to go and live in New York, and I just thought that'd be the most fun thing in the world. And I remember having an opportunity, sitting down with the sort of the equivalent of the CPO back then, who had come to learn something about our department. And the first thing I said to her was, "Oh, and by the way, if an opportunity comes up in New York, I'm top of the list. I'll relocate at a moment's notice." But the reality was, when the opportunity did come up about 2 years later, there probably wasn't anyone on the board of Marks and Spencer at the time that didn't know that if they offered it to me, I would say yes. And
Yeah.
my name came up, and everyone goes, "Oh, Laura wants that job, doesn't she?" And I got it. And they only gave it out about once every 3 years to one of the whatever 200,000 people that were working in the organisation. So the first thing is, they're not psychic. If you want something, let them know.
Yeah.
And the second thing I would also say, which is sort of sits similar but is different, because this is, really important, is take responsibility for your own development. I think there's a lot of onus on organizations to provide the training for their teams and to think about what that is. But actually, it's your career and your life. So I think there's sometimes a time when discretionary effort is required. There's some development that is mandatory, right? If you've got to do something for health and safety and it's a core part of your job, absolutely, the organization should pay for it and you should do it in work time. If there's something that's a win-win, that's going to really help you get promoted or is going to be an advancement for you, but is also part of your PDP, then it's a bit of give and take. But the organization will do well if you develop that skill, but so will you. So maybe it's a bit more quid pro quo. But if there's something you want to do that's 100% for your career advancement and for your development, don't wait to be offered it. Invest in yourself, go and do it yourself, or certainly ask for it. And maybe the company will help you fund it, but then you do it in your own time outside of work hours. But this idea of really thinking about, how am I going to do this, and who's funding it and whose responsibility is it to fund my own development. So take responsibility for your own career development is the first thing I say. And then the final thing I'd like to say, my absolute biggest tip probably, is choose to become a star manager. And by that I mean, when someone comes to you with a problem, don't just tell them what to do. Bite your tongue for that split second and stop just for a split second and think, is this a coachable moment? Could I ask a question right now instead of telling someone what to do? And if you can, it's not a health and safety issue and it's not a big emergency, then really learn to craft powerful questions and ask great questions and actively listen to help that other person come up with some ideas. And when they do, help them get to a result. So R in star is for a result. Because if you're just having a nice conversation, it's for nothing if there's no outcome. You're still a line manager, you're still a leader. There still needs to become responsibility for the outcome of that conversation. So become a star manager, stop, think, ask, and get a result.
I love that. That's such great advice across the board, Laura, for any one of our listeners, at different levels. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. And thank you so much for joining us today on the NovoEDTalks podcast.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to another episode of NovoEDTalks.